Cambridge Muslim College, training the next generation of Muslim thinkers.
So when we think about the 5 pillars of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ said Islam is built upon 5. So we often, when we think about that, we think about the individual, and that's absolutely correct. What is it that preserves your own faith and your own life and your own focus and your own spiritual growth? It's the fact that 5 times a day you're performing ablutions, you're bowing, you're prostrating. Once a year you're energized with a month of fasting. You're connected to the needy with your zakat. You go once in a year to Hajj, which is like an incredible journey. And there's no doubt that these 5 pillars are that thing that keeps connecting you. Whenever the world and the devil and everybody else tries to give you ideas, you just prostrate and all that kind of dissipates, and then the journey goes on. But the 5 pillars also have another dimension which I'd like to be focusing on today, which is their social dimension. The 5 pillars are not just upholding the faith in your life, but they're actually upholding the community of believers. And without the 5 pillars in place, you cannot actually have a healthy community of believers. And that creates a great deal of puzzles and confusions that we're all trying to deal with. And perhaps we need to look back at the foundations first, before we start, forgetting them, thinking about other things on top of that. What do I mean by the social dimensions? Well, let's look at each of them. The first of the pillars is the shahada. To testify there's no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his messenger. The shahada, what does it mean to the community? It signals that you're part of the community. The shahada is the key to being now considered part of this community, which is being served and upheld by the rest of these pillars. Prior to the shahada, this person in question cannot wed a Muslim, may not slaughter meat for the Muslim, that is a Jew or a Christian slaughters it. He is not prayed over, or she is not prayed over. There's a whole set of rules that the shahada now declares that this person is part of the community and this person has particular rights and particular duties. The next of the pillars is the prayer. And the prayer is probably the most foundational of all of these pillars in the life of the community. Because it's through the prayer, and for the sake of the prayer, that we have Islam's greatest institution, which is the mosque. We might complain many complaints about what's happening in our mosques, but have a thought for a second if there were no mosques at all. Imagine there's no mosque in Britain. Where would Islam in Britain be? It would be hard to talk about Islam in Britain, to be quite frank. It would be something some of you might do at home. You might not have anyone to talk to about it, and you'd be surprised. It becomes very, very thin. And so the mosque is the institution at the base of the religious community, and it's incredibly powerful, regardless of what the politics is, that will happen in all of your mosques. The fiqh of the prayer is very interesting, in really showing us the social part of what the prayer was meant to be serving. So the mosque is a place, of course, people gather, they pray, they've been encouraged to pray. There's the Friday prayer. The Friday prayer is really fascinating if you study the old fiqh. Because in the original fiqh, in the original communities of Islam, there was only allowed to be one Friday prayer per city. And that's why you'd only have one Jami' mosque of Basra, or one Jami' mosque of Kufa. Everybody had to pray Jum'ah, and it had to be that one prayer. You miss it, you miss Jum'ah. That caused problems, of course, in theory. Why? Because if you're Brelfi or Deobandi or Hanafi or Shaf, you have all these problems. And that one Imam who you must pray behind, what if he's not from your group? Disaster. I want my own Jum'ah. Well, you can't, it's not valid. That's why certainly some jurists, like the Hanafi school, they said the condition of the Imam of Jum'ah is that the Sultan appoints him. And why did they say that? Is that to make people aware that you don't have any choice in this matter. There's one Imam, he's going to be appointed. If you want Jum'ah, this is the Jum'ah. What does that tell us? It tells us quite a lot about what the vision of the prayer was for the Muslim community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the entire community to physically gather. And it doesn't matter what your specific interests are and inclinations are, you have to pray with the group. Every week, the group has to physically meet in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happens when the group meets? They don't just pray quietly. There's meeting, there's talking, there's lunch, there might be stalls outside, there might be people sitting and chatting until Asr. The mosque has a vision about bringing the community together and providing a space for them to meet, and then all the things that come along with that. And so that I'm going to call a very clear social vision of the prayer. And that's why the prayer is the absolute pillar of the community. And I will come back to the prayer. The next of them is the Zakat. The Zakat also is actually primarily a social pillar. We only think of it in social terms. Meaning it's about helping somebody. In the origins, if you go back, it's nice to go back just to see how these were originally functioning. Zakat in its origin was a centralized institution. There were employed collectors. They would come in to take your zakat. They would circulate it to the needy. One of the most interesting pointers to a clear social communal vision of the zakat was the insistence on zakat being paid locally. And again, in the early community, they took this fairly seriously. You have a famous incident of Mu'adh ibn Jabal, who was in Yemen, who was in charge of really the governor, and zakat was under the governor, who sent back, half of his, or a portion of the zakat, maybe they said a third or something, back to Medina, and the rest he distributed in Yemen, where he was. And Umar said, "What are you doing? Give it all to the people of Yemen. Why are you sending it back here?" And the next year it became a half, and this year it became all of it. And every year was writing to him, "Well, what are you trying to do?" And his thing was, "I'm sorry, but there's nobody I can give it to anymore. There's no poor people here." You have the story of Sa'id ibn Jubayr, who was a Kufan, but he studied in Mecca and in Ibn Abbas's circle. He met a man traveling from Iraq with his cattle and wealth. And he said, what's your plan? He said, I'm going to give my zakat in Mecca. Why? Because Mecca, 100,000 times your zakat must be more reward, right? Because it's Mecca. And the Sa'id said, what are you doing? Go back to Kufa, or go back to Iraq and pay your zakat there. And so it was very clear that zakat had a localized communal vision. What is it meant to be creating in you then? A sense of responsibility to where you are. It's a natural consequence of what the zakat is trying to tell you. That, there's people who are needy where you are. Are you aware of your responsibility to them? The zakat is igniting the interest. They're needy in the community. Do they know where they can turn? The zakat is igniting in them. You have neighbors here, they will look after you. And so the social message of zakat and its localized vision and a foundation of care and concern and responsibility that it creates is extremely obvious just by looking at the rules of zakat and certainly how the institution started. And I'll come back to this also. The next pillar is fasting. Fasting is the most personal of the acts of worship. I could be fasting now, except you saw me have lunch, so you know that I'm not fasting. But you wouldn't know. It's the most personal thing imaginable. Yet, why is it that in Ramadan, more people fast, than pray, at other times of the year, or do anything else? What's happening? Ramadan is an incredibly social experience. Otherwise, people wouldn't bother fasting, if they weren't doing, the other stuff the rest of the year. So there is clearly, in this very individual experience, a tremendous socially electric month where everyone's fasting and everyone's gathering and they're eating together. Prophet ﷺ encouraged the breaking of other people's fast. So Ramadan is about eating together, although it's also about fasting. And that's why people often, maybe in England it's tricky in the summer, but often you dine more with your neighbours in Ramadan. You eat more in the people in the mosque than you ever would do any other time of the year. And that's part of the energy of what the fasting creates. There's a social vision here because we feel it, whether you without an institution. It's obvious. And obviously there's the Ramadan prayers and whatever happens, which are all social energies, bringing people together over food, over neighborliness, and over the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we come to the Hajj. And the Hajj is obvious, a meeting, obviously a meeting of the global community, which doesn't have to be described because there's so many people that you can't miss them really. Malcolm X, he spoke about his Hajj experience. It was very powerful. He only spoke about the social element. He wasn't speaking about, his whole thing was, the social thing is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And that was enough to really, really transform him. And so I hope you can all see then that the 5 pillars are pillars upholding a community. If they are not upholding the community, if we are not directed to our responsibilities to our community, then we haven't understood the 5 pillars. We haven't given them their due. Then what else are we going to be building after that? We talk about Islam and Britain. Well, Islam is built upon 5. These 5 will tell us a lot about what we have to do here. And sometimes you don't think enough about what it is these pillars are actually trying to tell us. So what these pillars are saying, and I'm saying it's extremely clear, it's the importance of the believers having spaces together to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to be reminded of Him, to have support, and to build ties. That is the underlying spirit of what these pillars are bringing to any community of the faithful. And so we have to see then, are we doing that? And if we're not, then how do we start? One interesting thing before we talk about the here and the now is again a little bit about history. What was the history of these pillars? A very simple, two-dimensional, very quick view of the history of these pillars. Again, prayer and zakat now is my primary social institutions now, out of these pillars. We find that in the early community, they really were the pillars. Zakat was an incredibly important source of finances for much of the support and care that happened in the early community. And you'll be aware of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's insistence on collecting the zakat from all wealth that was due. The zakat was a driver of a lot of the social care that Islam needed, that Islam... The mosque was exactly this sort of driver of which I've spoken. It was in the mosque where people would meet. When we started developing a scholarly class, it was in the mosque where the circles of knowledge used to happen. The mosque was the gathering, the mosque was the meeting, the mosque was the thinking, the mosque was a real center. Over history, over the passage of time, the pillars gave birth to other institutions. And those institutions, I like us to think of them as an extension of the pillars, built upon the spirit of the pillars, fulfilling the purpose of the pillars. So I look at what the mosque was doing, providing a space for meeting and worship. That naturally gave birth to a number of institutions which were open to the public, dedicated to some of these activities. So you had your Sufi lodges, khanqahs, zawiyas. You had your madrasas, law colleges, hadith colleges. You had your other forms of lodgings. What were they doing if you walked into some medieval Cairo? You had a whole list of institutions you could walk into and get some hot food, get a place to sleep, get somebody to smile at you. You could just walk in and find a scholarly circle, just sit down. You might not know much, but you just want to sit and see what the scholars are up to. You could go up to the man after the prayer and ask him for some advice. You'd see, there's all these gatherings of the remembrance of Allah. Just go there and sit, soak up, wherever you are in life, and just carry on. All of these fantastic institutions, they were actually built upon a particular social vision that the mosque established. And they continued that into wonderful, specialized avenues. And the entire community was built around this. The zakat did likewise. So whereas the zakat in the earliest community was a real foundational driver for particular forms of financial support and care. As time went on, other forms developed, specialized forms, primarily the awqaf, different forms of private endowments. You could again walk into some medieval Cairo and you have private endowments which are funding these other institutions, right? The madrasas, the khanqahs, the lodgings, where they get the food from, free bread, free this, free apples, free whatever, meals on Friday, this guy's doing meals on Thursday. You had special endowments for schooling for children, you had services for the disabled, you had hospitals for injured birds, paid for through awqaf. It was quite remarkable. And in fact, my feeling is that Zakat wasn't the front runner or the front driver in this period. Because a good foundation was laid upon which people were inspired to pursue private efforts, because the pillars spoke a message to them. And the message was clear. It had things to do with belonging, it had things to do with local responsibility, it had things to do with giving, about support, about ties, about reminding people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and giving them something to belong to. The pillars spoke a very clear message, and they gave birth to something quite remarkable. So what we can get from what we're saying is a clear message then of what we have to do here. When we speak about building a faith community, we have to redirect ourselves to really thinking about what it means to build faith community. Each of these words should speak to us through what these pillars are establishing. The importance of physical meeting, of social meeting, of financial support, of spiritual support, of avenues for knowledge that have to be accessible and open to whoever says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. No questions asked. What's your reason? What's your motive? Where do you come from? What do you want? No questions asked. You want to be part of us? This is what we do. And we have a great deal of responsibility to whoever wants to remember Allah and follow the way of His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Very simple. Very simple message. And so what we have to do, is to think together. And again, I'm going to focus on, like I said, the prayer and zakat as the two fundamental institutions that are institutionalized, as opposed to the fasting, for example. Is let's look at the mosque. If I said the mosque had a larger social vision, of which I've described, how much are our mosques serving that? If they're falling short, if people are feeling alienated, and I'm including women as well, in the olden days you're right, see, women didn't have to do a lot of things, go to Jummah, they might not have spaces in mosques in particular parts of the world, but they definitely had their other forms of social networks that were filling in for the social needs that women were getting in their mosques. In the absence of all of that, what I call the message of the pillars has to speak to everybody who's part of the community, who simply is anyone who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So whether it's women, whether it's ethnic groups, whether it's, again, as you can see, sectarian thoughts are a problem here, you see. The issue of whether you want to be Salafi, Sufi, this, that, the other, you can argue that online, you can write papers on that, there's a space for that. But that's not what this is talking about. And to bring that talk into this foundational effort is actually undermining, I believe, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the religion is open for everybody. And anybody who says the statement and wants to be a part has these rights and has these responsibilities. All the other questions, the doctrine stuff, the group stuff, the this stuff, the that stuff, that has a place. But its place is not in what we're talking about here. This has to be for everybody. And we have to put that stuff in its place, which is safe, healthy debate and exchange. If we find our mosques are not like that, and they're not providing such spaces, then maybe we can, like I said, it has happened in the middle period, the mosque gave birth to institutions through its spirit. Then maybe we have to think about creating such spaces wherever we are, and it's not that complicated. Where you are, you might just have to hire a hall for Friday evenings. Get some families together, have dinner, smile. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge, because it's not a knowledge-heavy message. It's a social, spiritual message, founded on service and sincerity. Yeah, that's what the pillars are, right? So it's not about you to be a great scholar now to figure out what the pillars are about. But it's about, in the absence of an institution that is fulfilling these, how can we augment that? This is the puzzle. There's a form of centralization the pillars call for. I'll come to that right at the end, because it borders on the sphere of the political. But in the run-up to all of that, we are people in communities. And so all I will say is, it doesn't take a lot of knowledge, it just takes a few good people to find out a way to bring people together. It's not complicated, it just takes a little bit of effort. But what it takes is to be aware that this is at the foundations of being a Muslim in society. It's not a periphery activity, it's a foundational activity. That's just the main thing we need to be aware of. So I think that's what I call the spirit of the prayer. We come to the zakat, then it's not just the spirit, it's actually the thing itself needs to be thought about, because when it comes to the prayer, we actually have mosques, we actually have Friday prayers, we actually have group prayers. When it comes to zakat, actually we almost have nothing. Why is that? It's because for an unfortunately long period of time, the zakat was treated quite literally as a very personal thing. You just have to get it done. Nothing more to it. It has no purpose, no role, no vision, no spirit, no message, no responsibility, nothing to think about. It just has got to be done. Some people do it, and some people don't. Those who don't, their simple argument is, well, I support this project, I support that project, this thing doesn't make sense to me. 2.5 cents not a lot of money, I don't see where it's going, I can't see why this is so important. And on some level, that argument makes sense, because nothing has been presented to them to show them why actually this 2.5% can actually make a big difference if we follow all of its rules and all of its spirit. This is why it ties in what we said yesterday, that you can't reduce the religion to simple statements, that you just want to get them done, without having a moment to, what I call listen, is to really think about the implications of what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to do, because if you don't think, you might miss the instruction altogether, because you don't know exactly what it was that He actually was telling you. Too busy just to get it done without any thought. That's why reflection is something important for all of us. Zakat is powerful because, well, let's look at all of its pieces again from its fifth, right? Zakat, just as a brief introduction, it's only 2.5% is the basic number. It's not a huge amount. It's only taken from wealth that economies are focused on growing. And there's three forms of traditional economy in the world. There's your agrarian, animal herding economy. There's your agricultural economy. And there's your trade economy. Zakat is only on these three forms of economy, not on anything else that you might own. So if you're an animal herder, or you breed animals only to increase their number, then you will pay on your heads of animals if you've reached a particular number. These are animals that you only have them for breeding, right? So the assumption is they're already increasing. If you were to take one away, it's not causing a severe detriment, because this wealth, you only have it to increase its number. That's why the zakat is only on wealth that you're trying to grow. It's always meant to be easy. And all of the pillars have this little mystery, is that they're not complicated. And we shouldn't complicate them. They were made to be straightforward, simple, and not an undue amount of sacrifice. So the entry level is very easy for whoever wants to do that. Zakat is likewise. It's not cutting off your arm. It's not telling you to, it's very, very simple. Are you an animal herder who just breeds them? Just give me some of your baby. You're already making some. Just give us one. We'll give it to some poor family. You'll give them milk. And most of the zakat at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was through animals. The other one was the agriculture that was important. Agricultural economies, like Medina was an agricultural economy primarily. What do these people do? Their whole year's work is just to plough the land, something will come out. Their whole effort is things come out of the ground. So God says, just give us a little bit of that produce, we will give it to the poor. So it's not wealth you have that we're, again, taking away from you. It's the things you're already, your whole purpose is to develop them. Just give a little bit of that to the poor. It's not a big sacrifice. It's not meant to be breaking anything for you. But it adds up. The last economy is the trade economy. That's what the Meccans were focused on. The trade economy is trade goods and then the medium of exchange, which was gold and silver. And so there's 2.5%, which we all know is only on the trade economy. It's not on the other economies. So animals have their own calculation. Sheep has their own thing. Cows have their own thing. It's complicated. Like the camel one is quite complicated. Yeah. Yeah. So I said land is part of that, right? So I said the agricultural economy, which is land. I'm talking about land produce right now, not land of investment.
Right.
That will be added on to your trade economy if you're trading with it. Otherwise, there's nothing on it. It's very simple, you see. So the zakat is, like I said, it's trying to just be something which is easy for you to give and just a little bit of. But that's the mystery of everything. That's the mystery and the power of zakat. The business economy, traders like the Meccans, they're the ones who just have a percentage, which is the 2.5%. And again, if you're a trader, your whole year's effort is just to buy something and sell it. Get some money, buy something and sell it. That's your whole energy, it's just amassing. And so the zakat is just saying that thing that you're amassing, a little bit of it shouldn't be too difficult for you, just give that away as well. So I want you to understand why is zakat so little. That's what keeps it as a running institution. It's not meant to be a sacrifice for the diehard. It's something that whoever wants to come into the community is just a little bit to give it to others. But if you manage it, as the rest of the rules are talking about, it's very, very powerful because it all adds up. This guy's trade and that guy's gold, and there's 5 camels from here and 3 sheep from here. We've got half of a harvest of corn. A lot gets together, which really changes people's lives in those communities again. So the first thing to understand is the littleness of zakat is its secret, the little payment. The power of it is in its distribution. The distribution of zakat is to, again, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordains, if you like, 8 categories for the payment of zakat. The indigent, the impoverished, people who are in debt, people who are slaves trying to buy their freedom, people who are, if you like, devoted to the path of God, which used to mean like warriors because there was no professional armies in those days. So the whole idea of defense, in the old world, without there's always, the borders always fluid, right? The zakat was kind of supporting the defense effort. There was a zakat was for travelers. Someone. Yes, Steve, thank you very much. The travelers, people who just come out of town but they ran out of money, just to help them get back home again. There was also zakat collectors who were paid from the zakat. Again, part of the little secret of the zakat is that it doesn't take too much from any one individual. The payment for the one who does it also comes from it. It's a self-sustaining, very simple model. Again, nothing complicated, but it does a lot. There's the mu'allafat al-qulub also, which some debate amongst the scholars about its definition, which means to bring hearts close. Whether it's people who are new to Islam, it's just to give them some money so that they find their footing without any struggle. People who want to come to Islam, again, there's a bit of an explanation there we can talk about later. So just to see, zakat can do a great deal. And many people who don't pay zakat is because they can't see that. And why don't they see that? Because we haven't done that job for them. We've been too busy with our private devotional thing and not realizing that to truly obey the spirit of the most fundamental instruction is to think a bit deeper than mere getting the job done. So that brings us then to where we are right now. Um, we have in the UK, like I said, I'm not intending to put a plug in for the National Zakat Foundation, but Iqbal was here last night, and he spoke about what I think is quite a fantastic and much needed project, and in many ways a leader project for many countries and communities in the world, is how do you really create that sense of responsibility in a community for itself. Well, part of what the mystery of the Zakat is it solves puzzles that we spend hours and hours writing about. For example, the puzzle of belonging. Where do I belong? Where you pay the Zakat actually probably answers that question sometimes. So simply encouraging people to pay locally, that's what I'm saying, the pillars have a mystery because they solve a lot of our complicated questions, all indirectly. The National Zakat Foundation then is trying to organise again, and the other problem, is also who's needy in Britain. You can't do that as an individual, it's almost impossible. I mean, unless I'm really roaming London all night long, I won't have a good grasp of what it means to be needy in Britain. That's why Zakat needs to be institutionalised, and that's why I don't think it's an option for us anymore to be lazy about this as a community. We have to institutionalise Zakat. One of the benefits, again, there's a number of benefits of institutionalisation, which I think the thing, Zakat can't really work without. Part of it, like I said, is bringing together payers, givers, people in need. Part of it is, again, bringing together funds and bringing together scholars. There's a lot of puzzles of how to apply Zakat in the modern world. If it's just me and my £5, there's no scholar going to bend over his backwards to tell me where to spend my £5, right? But we're talking about millions that could do a lot of difference. Then people have to think a little bit harder what all of this means. And so that's again why I'm saying the 5 pillars, they speak to almost all of our problems that we're talking about, but with an underlying spirit that maybe sometimes is missing in how we think about these problems. One thing about the 8 categories, scholars have differed on how they're meant to be interpreted, the 8 categories within the Quran. So for example, the Hanafi school actually stands out because it sees all of them as expressions of poor people. So the guy who's the warrior, he takes zakat because he hasn't got funds. The traveller takes zakat because he hasn't got the funds. And so on. They're all actually the same idea. It's just different forms of poor people in society, except for the zakat collector, they say. Why is that interesting? Because the way, if you look at that as a philosophy, what it's saying is the categories of zakat then are not really 8. It's one idea, and the categories are saying, almost creatively look at your community and identify groups of people that would be finding it hard to get by. So it's not about 7 categories and stop. It's one idea which might show in these 7 ways. And there might be other ways, other groups in your society. You could say this is a category that needs to be served, because the underlying thing you're looking for really is just financial neediness. You're not looking for anything else.
But this is stated in the Quran.
It is, but the problem. So for the Hanafi scholars,
yes,
all you're looking for is that the person is poor. As long as he's poor, you will give him zakat, right? So all of these, the person in debt, he is poor, and they define it simply as below the nisab, right? The guy who's traveling, as long as it's below the nisab, give him zakat. The guy who's below the nisab, so it's all one idea, it's just below the nisab. So it becomes one idea with some manifestations. Why give manifestations if that's how you look at it? It's telling you to think about groups of people in society who would be under a particular line which makes them needy. And what it's urging you then is to really think about people in your society, groups of people, groups of workers or groups of students and so on, and see their needs, and not to stop just on the most needy, but groups of people in need. Other scholars, they look at the 8 categories as independent categories. They don't bring them under one meaning, as the Hanafi scholars do. The avenue that this, if you like, a philosophy, if you like, of zakat distribution, the avenues that this opens is a slightly more in-depth exploration of the 8 categories. What are forms of slavery in society? What are forms of, and so on, of the other categories? But either way, the categories are telling us to look really hard where we live, really. and see what forms of support are needed. They tell us it in different ways, but the categories, however you look at it, that's what they're trying to say. Why is that important as well? Because now we come down to us. What's our role in really building a foundation of a real zakat system where we live? Our role, as far as I can see, might not be that we all make our own zakat institution, because if you have some people who are already building that, maybe our role is to support that. What does support mean? It means spreading awareness, obviously, among those that you know, of the virtue of giving zakat, our responsibility to our communities in giving zakat, the transformation, and so on, to encourage people. This is part of our job. The other part of our job in this, I think, is especially those of us who work with communities, is to try and, like I said, help in the effort of identifying areas of neediness. You might be someone who works with people who are, have mental health issues, or people who work with so on. You might realize, this is a community of people, generally that they find they struggle to get by. They need to be support. You become a bridge of investigating a whole new avenue of zakat support. And you raise that to the institutions and people who are trying to organize this. Surah Al-Asr, I just want to just quickly say, Surah Al-Asr is a surah that's very short, you will all know it. It basically says everyone is a loser. Everyone's going to be a loser, except if you believe and do good deeds. But then it specifies two forms of good deed. Otherwise you're still partially a loser. The first form was a communal concern to remind each other to the truth. And the second was a communal concern to exhort each other to patience. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Patience, what is patience ultimately, is not giving up. So I've resolved to pray for the first time. Patience is, I don't give up after my first day, right? That's what patience is. How do you help each other communally to have patience? Is that we have to be there for each other, right? Whoever's trying a new step in their religious life, we encourage them, right? Surah Al-Asr, I feel, is just summarizing what the 5 pillars are all about. Because the 5 pillars are telling us it's not enough to live in your cave. Your success is directly tied to how much help and support you can give to those who need that, who are around you. And so it's not actually a matter on the periphery that, when we get some energy or focus, fine, whatever. It's not a peripheral activity. It's tied directly to success and failure, which is the input, again, the social impetus at the heart of the Islamic vision of society. That our success is being there for other people. The 5 pillars are at the heart of showing us how we have to build that. And they're not everything, but they will speak to us what to build from that, as I've shown. When it comes to da'wah, I can't think of a stronger da'wah than a community that cares. I can't think of a message you can come up with, or a pamphlet, or a leaflet, or an argument that is stronger than simply a community that cares. You want some food, there's food. You want to talk to someone, there's someone. You want a lifeline, there's a lifeline. You want to pray, there's prayer. You can't top that. And that's why the pillars are what Islam is built upon. It's not about, everything else comes later. We need our rational arguments. But that's not what Islam is built upon. It's built upon what souls need, which is here. It doesn't take a great degree of learning, and we can all do it. The last thing was the puzzle. I was going to throw it out there as a puzzle. The 5 pillars are political in their origin. And what do I mean by that? If I were to do what I'm saying in any Muslim country, I'm going to gather the zakat, I'm going to distribute it, I'm going to organize it, I'm going to control the 5 prayers, I'm going to use the Jummah imams, I think I'll go straight to jail or something. Right? Why is that? The 5 pillars call towards a form of centralization, if you really follow the rules through. We might say we don't need that in Britain. That's the advantage of being in Britain as well. It gives us an idea of thinking about the spirit of this message and how it best works here. But if you really think about the classical rules at least, they call towards forms of centralization. Whether it's moon sightings for fasting, whether it's zakat collections and distribution, whether it's organizing Friday prayers, which ultimately was meant to have some kind of oversight. The 5 pillars call towards forms of leadership that we also talk a lot about. We have a lot of energy we spend on that. The 5 pillars, in their own way, urge the creating of a form of leadership, organizational leadership. The problem we have to getting there is I'm going to call it our sectarian issues. The leader can be anybody, but it can't be Salafi, or can't be this, or it can't be that. That's fine on one level, but it's not fine on another level. And that's where politics is always messy. I'm not saying it has to go this way. There could be another way that we figure out organizing pillars in Britain, and we have that freedom. But I have a feeling, if we really follow it through, there's some kind of higher council of religious affairs that gets built from this. It might be impossible, it sounds like, I'm just saying, right? If that happens, then whoever turns away from that group is going to be the Muqtada. I'm just saying, he's the one that's undermining Islam in Britain. If there were a way to organize this. You might think, but that group follows calculations, and I want to follow local sightings. I'm sorry to say that, but that's your problem. Because the truth of the matter is, calculation is something that's got a classical precedent, and these forms of organization, which take the place of a judge in the absence of a Muslim, government, they have that right. And that's where sometimes our personal views have their place. And I'll argue at length why Hanifism is the best ism there is, but it only has its place. What we're talking about here is a vast communal vision. It does lead to a form of organization. It could lead to forms of people we don't like. It could lead to all kinds of things. But I have a feeling whatever it leads to is 1,000,000 times better than where we are today. It doesn't have to go there. I'll leave that to you. This is the puzzle. I don't know the answer, and that's all I want to say.